Hey guys! So, today is... it's a very tired day today. I woke up in the middle of the night and I had this idea that I wanted to start working on. And so you'll have to excuse me, I'm a little bit low energy today. So we're gonna take an easy one today, alright? Let's talk about the accessible web. Yes, accessibility on the web. So let's get into it. Now, this is a political minefield. It is a source of, it's the sort of topic which is in the same type of ballpark as most humanitarian topics. Let me explain. You see, I don't know about you, but here in Sweden, there's a phenomenon that politicians like to use to their advantage, of course. And it's been working out pretty well so far, but it's only now when people are getting a little bit frustrated with this that things are shifting over from the politically correct side over to frustration and anger at people basically being ignored. And you see, the phenomenon that I'm speaking of is that you can, in the public eye, claim that something is a certain way and speak and behave as if this is just an obvious choice or an obvious thing for absolutely everybody living on this planet here that we all share. And you see, the idea is that if you, or rather it seems to be, I don't know if this is true, but it seems to be that the idea is that if you just pretend hard enough and act hard enough as if something is a certain way, everybody will just follow along. And this is especially true if this thing is something that is very easy to get on board with. You see, it's very tricky to convince the world that something is very normal and everyday if it's something that's very obviously not a normal and everyday thing. Now, I'm not going to bore you too much with this because we need to tie this back into programming. And bear with me, we're getting there. You see, every single public speaker that I've ever seen who talks about the accessible web speaks as if it's an obvious thing that you should think about accessibility. Every single blogger I've ever read about, or every article I've ever read about accessibility speaks as if this is an everyday, absolutely normal, obvious thing that every single programmer should know. Now let me tell you the real story. The real story is that the accessible web is a joke. It's an absolute joke. There is nothing that is as ignored on the web as accessibility. Not a single company, apart from very specific organizations, will prioritize accessibility. And I'll tell you why they don't do this sort of thing. They don't because it's very costly, or rather there is more cost involved in making something accessible to people with disabilities. And the problem with that is that since for most companies, the amount of people who are using their product with accessibility issues or disabilities, in their heads, statistically, that's a very small percentage of human beings. Now, I've had several discussions with people who've been telling me that, well, I think it's something really high, like 7.9% of all adult humans have some form of issue with color blindness or poor eyesight, etc., etc. And most of these statistics, although they are fairly accurate, I would assume, don't really cater to the fundamental thing. And the fundamental thing isn't whether or not someone with a disability is feeling, how do I put it, is being neglected when you're building an application. The fundamental thing that is the real question is, how much does this affect your conversion? Because that's what the company cares about. Your business does not care. And this is, I'm sorry, but this is true. They don't care about people with disabilities. They care about money. And this is true for pretty much every single business. Do you want me to prove it? I walk around and I see nowhere do I see that there's anybody here who has put up a wheelchair ramp or anything like that. Do I think that this is a nice thing? No, I don't. But what I dislike even more is that the political advocates pretend as if you as a developer, like they don't give you the reality of things. They are trying to sell you a world that does not exist, or a reality that is simply not true. Should we change it? Should we try to be more focused on accessibility? Of course we should. Of course. But there's a damn big difference between what reality is and what it should be. And if I can make that distinction, so should you be able to. You should be able to do that too. And that is very easy for me to know, since I've been working for quite a while. But for a junior, you might not think it's so obvious or so. Do you see what I'm saying? It's misinformation. You're being sold a reality that is simply not true. I've even seen some of the big profiles on live, well, it's YouTube, not television, but YouTube, not know the different area labels and the different accessibility things like color contrast and all these things. They have no idea, and these are the people who are like they are the figureheads of the IT world. Even they don't know, because it's not a common thing. Maybe we should make it a common thing, but I don't think that's ever going to happen. I'm sorry to say, because to put it simply, from a business perspective, and at the end of the day, it is about money. Programmers get paid in money because they are producing something that gains money for the company. It's that simple. And unless you're selling a product that really needs to cater to people with disabilities, you're not going to see much of it. Now, I learn it alongside everything else because I think it's very valuable to know it if I ever get to a position where I actually need to know it. If you're working for, say, the government, then it's very important that you know it. If you work for a small publishing business or a small IT company or consultancy, it's not so important that you know it, depending on your client, of course. And then, of course, we have Google and Facebook and these massive and these are the people who usually advocate accessibility. And if you think about it, of course accessibility makes sense to a company that literally has the size of user base that where even if they make something accessible and they see even a 0.1% increase in conversion rate due to as a result of focusing on accessibility, that translates to hundreds of millions of dollars every year for them. But for a small business, it doesn't mean anything. In fact, the cost of developing an accessible application is actually, in salary terms, the cost of doing it is actually much higher than the value that you get at the end of the day. Because don't kid yourself, making something accessible takes longer. And it doesn't, unit testing is people have a very similar argument against unit testing. Unit testing takes longer, yeah. But at the end of the day, unit testing, in theory, converts to a more stable product and less time spent on fixing bugs. Disabilities, or being oriented around accessibility, doesn't convert into anything. Apart from, as I said, maybe an extremely minor increase in revenue stream. And once again, if you line those two numbers up, the cost of building the thing versus the gain of what you produced, that's your benchmark, if it's worth something to your company or not. Now, I don't want you to think that I'm against people with disabilities, because I'm not. I wish things were different, but what I think, as I said, what I think is important to know here is that for you who may not know better, you need to know the reality of things. And the reality is that very few companies care about accessibility, and I'm talking major companies. Now, I can't mention any names because I know that this is, of course, a political, as I said, it's a political minefield. And I might be completely hated for what I'm saying, but I just want you to know the truth. And it is the truth. Just as there is no Santa Claus, and just as that there is no that there is not world peace and not everybody loves everybody else, you don't care about people with accessibilities or disabilities. Sorry, the IT world does not care. It is a fact of the matter. Even, as I said, companies that you would think would care don't. And so what does this mean for you as a developer? Well, this means that I think that you should be aware of accessibilities. There are various very good techniques for acquiring skills or for helping out in this area. And there are things that you can do in order to improve things, but I don't want you to be sold the idea that you have to know this. In fact, I think it's so rare that any company actually cares about this thing. I've actually done my own tests with companies just to see if they care about accessibility, where we just ask them whether or not they've considered how their color palette is going to affect people with color blindness. And even the designers kind of go, because they don't think about it. It's that simple. It doesn't factor into their thought process at all. And whenever somebody talks about, hey, let's make things accessible, and I explain to them that if I'm supposed to be able to make something accessible to someone, the first thing I need to do is that I need to go through the whole code base, well, most of it, and I have to update all the elements, set proper roles on everything. I need to use a screen reader as part of my testing process. I need to be very sure that I have semantic HTML, because that's also very important. And I start explaining how much more overhead work that is involved in order to make something truly accessible. And my boss immediately tells me, okay, maybe we can put that on the backlog and get to it when we have time. Because cash is king, guys. And unfortunately, there is not much money in making things accessible. And it sucks. It really sucks. And I feel bad for all the people out there who are suffering from this. But if we are going to help out people with disabilities, I think we need to find another approach. Because in my experience, betting your money on people's goodwill and good heart usually don't end all that well when money is involved. Have a great day.